It is Wednesday, October 16th, 2024, and this is episode 5 of Night Talk from Montreal. I'm Gary MacDonald. And we just lost Eddie. Just like that. Uh, all right. It's going to be another busy night of issues to discuss, beginning with the Quebec government is now talking about limiting patients for doctors. Oh, stand by. Eddie's coming back here. Oh, try again, Eddie. The Quebec government is now beginning to look at a proposal that would prioritize family doctors to those in already poor health. Radio Canada broke the story late last week, and its sources indicate that the idea has been under consideration for months. All right, let's get Eddie back here. There we go.
Hi, I'm Eddie Tkalik, and yes, I'm live, and I'm actually live from Cayo Coco, Cuba. Gary, you got to stop sending me to these assignments.
Yeah, and it's a tough assignment, I know. Anyway, Eddie, I just started getting into the intro about the program that the Quebec government has under consideration now, as far as the doctors are concerned. So how would it work? Well, it appears Quebecers in good health or with minor health problems would be referred to a modified service that currently gives people without access to a family doctor access to medical appointments. It would include all patients with no major or moderate health problems, including those who have a family doctor. Patients deemed more vulnerable, such as complex or chronic conditions like cancer, mental issues, cardiovascular disease, or diabetes, would be assigned a family doctor. A new report released last week indicates, are you ready for this? 500,000 sick Quebecers do not have a family doctor at the moment. And this report is suggesting the transfer of up to 1.5, I think it was, 15 million, annual appointments from patients who have a doctor to those who do not. Health Minister Christian Dubé says it's too early to determine what would come of this proposal. Eddie, it seems to me like we're taking one issue, moving it over here, and then creating a new issue and moving it back over to the other side. No.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't been home for the last couple of days, but when you brought this up in a recent chat and looking at it, looking and actually seeing it in Montreal Gazette, I was a little taken aback by how they're coming up with a solution like this. I mean, look, Gary, it is a solution nonetheless. It's an attempt to try to fix something that, at the end of the day, is not really fixable without the necessary resources at the front end, which is our nurses, nurse practitioners, and doctors. There's just a tremendous lack of them. I really appreciate the fact they're trying to do something, but I don't think they're putting a solution in place that's not going to create more problems down the line, right? I mean, that was my first knee-jerk reaction, and then I told my wife Manella about this, and her reaction was, "What, are we going to be losing our family doctors because you and I just happen to be in generally good health?" I'm not sure I'd like that very much. And that was our general reaction as citizens of Quebec, right?
And I understand that our healthcare in this country is in just utter chaos, and even more so in the last 4 or 5 years with some of the impact of dealing with the pandemic. But as I said a moment ago, to me, it's shifting one issue to one side and bringing the other problems over to the other side. And when you come right down to it, Eddie, Deborah and I have experience in dealing with the access to medical appointment system, or I don't actually. I've been very lucky in that respect, but Deborah has had experience with that. And it's a very slow and very frustrating process at times in trying to call in and get your appointment booked. And, you're very quickly told, although this is happening in private practice as well with a lot of the newer doctors, when you come in, you have one issue only. That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah, any other issues? Book another appointment and bring
book
another
another
issue on. Yeah,
appointment.
yeah. And tick the list off. So I think that there's a real problem with that. I don't see how that's really going to help anything. I was talking to my brother Wayne yesterday, who's a retired physician, and he was saying, and this is some of the comments I saw in reaction to this the other day as well. Like, how do you maintain a certain level of primary care throughout, and all of a sudden just move that patient into a whole different uh, access point where the
Right.
access is slower? What happens if that patient does get sick? Well, that side, the access point doesn't have all of the records right there, nor do they really know the individual that well. Whereas your family doctor, who you've built a relationship with over the last number of years, does know. Sometimes the medical issues and personality go hand in hand. So what my question is, what are we really gaining here? What is going to be the return on investment, other than you can point to say, well, these people, 500,000 Quebecers, didn't have a doctor, and maybe, and I don't know what the number is, they didn't mention it, but maybe say you have 250,000 of those 500,000 who are chronically ill, so they now have an access point to a family doctor. But for them getting into that doctor, it's going to be a little bit easier, but I don't think it's going to be a whole lot easier than going through the system of that's provided now by the government for the intake for medical appointments.
Well, you know what? It's as you were speaking, it kind of reminded me of the infamous television series called MASH, right? Where you'd have various soldiers coming in different conditions, medical conditions as a result of injury, and you pretty much go through triage. This is the individual that needs to be looked at first, and then we'll worry about the rest of them later. It almost seems like a parallel version, alternate universe of MASH, where I think the government running our healthcare system here in Canada, in Montreal, in Quebec, are essentially looking at what they have in terms of casualty level or injury level to a soldier, parallel that to a citizen, where they're saying we got a whole slew of very ill people out there, and we, rightly so, they're saying we need to do something by them that's correct in terms of getting them the medical assistance they need, because they seem to be the most critical patients, if you want to call it, in the healthcare system here. And then the other individuals are not as important, because at this present moment they're not sick, or they don't necessarily need that level of attention. So they're trying to balance a very delicate, get a very difficult balance here with a scale that does not exist. So I just think they're trying to get to those citizens that need it first. And you know what? In a way, I understand their thinking, because you want to address the sickest first, okay? And we don't have any resources available to us, but then we do have our family doctors, who are very important, that are dealing with both patients that need immediate assistance, patients that need frequent care, and they also have a workload of patients such as myself. I mean, I've had medical issues, but I'm in general good health, but I'm still seeing my family doctor on a regular basis, or when I need him in an ad hoc basis, where, hey, listen, I'm not feeling very well, I need to come see you, right? So I'm not taxing the system all that much. Even though I'm not taxing the system all that much, there's a certain level of breathing space that I think the government is seeing in my family doctor not having to deal me with on a regular basis. That they could take that time slot and apply it to somebody else completely different. And I think you're absolutely right, Gary. Both myself potentially losing a family doctor, where if I have to go see someone else through the existing medical system, whether it's through the CLSC or another assigned family doctor, they don't know anything about me. And I guarantee you they're not going to read a full history on me until they actually see me coming through the door and ask me, so what's your problem today? Right? So I have a great relationship with my family doctor, which I've had for almost 25 years. And then on the other side as well, you have an ill patient who doesn't have a family doctor, but he might have been through the hospital emergency system, right? Um, they too might have seen somebody on a regular basis in a hospital somewhere, and now they're going to be asked to go over to a family doctor for a continued follow up who doesn't really know them either. So both ways, there's a little bit of a learning exercise that has a learning exercise and a level of refamiliarization, doctor to patient. Very important patient to doctor because there's a high level of trust. I mean, quite honestly, my family doctor, I've never had a family doctor where I was able to just tell him what he needed to hear. Both mentally, I'm not just speaking about physical health, but both mentally and physically, I have that comfort level and I treat him as a family member where I can talk to him about anything. That doesn't come from a visit or two visits. This comes from years of tending to a relationship both ways across his desk, where we actually have conversation as human beings and we have conversations as doctor to patient. And I think by them trying to deploy something like this in the immediate, I agree with you 100%. There's going to be a problem with that in itself in terms of redeveloping those relationships. And then by the same token, it's basically, you're in a rowboat, let's plug in our finger in that hole while another one starts to leak. And what are you going to do? You don't have two fingers. You got to take your finger out and plug the other hole with the same finger. I think long run, this is not going to work. And what, Quebec came out first with the idea, and I believe they're the first ones throwing this idea around in Canada. You know what, Gary? Who's to say this is not something that's been bounced around in other provincial jurisdictions? They just haven't pulled the trigger to try something about it. So hats off for trying something. I don't think it's great that you made the initiative, but I really think they're going down the wrong road on this one for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to do any kind of a pilot program on it either, because to me, it's when you stand back and really think about it, we're really just uh, shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic. The system's
Yeah.
in trouble and sinking, and not so slowly either. And yet, yeah, you're just switching things around. And the first thing is, I can see a sudden swell in the number of people showing up at emergency rooms because they're so used to calling their family doctor and they're not familiar with the intake system that the government has in place for the medical appointments, and they're going to show up at emerge. It's just that simple, especially when they call and they find out that maybe they can't get an appointment for a week or better. The other side of it is it really going to open up that 15 million annual appointments? Because a lot of the younger doctors coming in and setting up practice, a lot of them are really focused on quality of life and lifestyle versus work. And they're if you look across the country, I think you're going to see that most newer doctors setting up are not taking on the patient loads that doctors in our age group generation did. You had some doctors, well over 6 or 7,000 patients, and some even higher. And most of the newer doctors coming in, they may take 2,500, maybe 3,000, 3,000, maybe pushing it. It's a lot of people, especially if it's, a portion of them older, because they're going to have um, more ailments to be dealing with overall. Yeah, we just lost Eddie again. So we'll just keep on rolling. The thing that I think really needs to happen is I think that the federal government, and I've said it here before, but I think that the federal government has to really step back and say, our healthcare system that we were all so proud of, and as Canadians, universal healthcare, is not really universal healthcare. We've been giving money to the provinces to provide the healthcare services because it's within their jurisdiction. Yet Ottawa is, fronting the biggest chunk of money going into healthcare budgets in the provinces and territories as it is. I think we need to step back, and Ottawa has to step in and say, you know what, this is not working. We need to establish a national standard in healthcare so it's the same from coast to coast to coast. And with that national standard comes one healthcare card issued by Ottawa, which is accepted without any issues whatsoever from coast to coast to coast. And you can expect, as a Quebecer traveling to British Columbia, or as an Albertan traveling to Nova Scotia, or any points in between, that you are entitled to the same type of service no matter where you are at that point in time. And I think that's where we have to go. Now, there's going to be a lot of howling and screeching and gnashing of teeth and crying from the provinces, you're stepping on our jurisdiction. Well, you know what? You have proven that you can't make it work. And if we're going to have a national healthcare system, a universal healthcare system, it has to be dealt with, and it has to be dealt with at the federal level. Eddie? Mm-hmm. So I think, and that's, it's going to take a prime minister with a lot of strength to step into that hornet's nest and do it. But, we've been doing it for years in a lot of, in our armed forces. When my brother and I first moved to Oromocto, which was next door to base Gagetown, and we started schools at that point, the town was still being developed, and the schools at that point were under control of the Department of National Defense. We did not have to buy so much as a pinky pearl eraser, nothing. It was all provided, and everybody got the same type of book, notebook, and rulers, pencils, pens. It was all there. But that was a level, and French started in grade 3 at that time, and in the rest of New Brunswick, of course, I was only, in grade 5. I don't think that, I know in the schools I attended in St. John and Fredericton, there was no French at all. But it started in grade 3 in Oromocto schools. And the reason was, at that time, they used to move troops back and forth and transfer them between the different bases across Canada. And also, there always was a big rotation to Germany at least once a year. So Department of National Defense said we have to maintain some kind of a standard here so that it's not that much of a shock for the kids and for the families in general and going in and out. And if you're in the services and you're attached to a base, each base has medical services. And again, there's a certain level of standard right across the country and around the world wherever we have bases present. So there's a lot to be said for doing it that way. I think there are different things we could probably come up with an economy of scale here, more so buying centrally through one spot, Ottawa, and instead of 10 provinces and territories, two territories. I think that's where we have to go, and we have to also, as a country, take a look at our education in much the same way. Anyway, that's where I'm headed with it overall. I think we all have to come on board with some ideas to try and balance out the healthcare system across the country as it is until we make that move or we get the right leader in place in Ottawa who can take that battle on because, man, oh man, you're going to have some thick armor to sell this one to the
Yeah,
provinces.
absolutely, Gary. I mean, there's a lot of times, over many coffees that you and I have had, uh, um, it goes to the strength of our leaders, right? I mean, I think it's probably another show we'll do at some point to speak about the incumbent and people pecking at his heels right now about the strength of our Canadian leader. And I don't rightly know whether the incumbent today, being Mr. Trudeau, or any of the other leaders of the country, have that mental tough fortitude to take on a project like this, because it's a monstrous undertaking, to have that energy and drive and sense of leadership to drive it to conclusion, because you and I feel that this would be the way to go. I personally think it's the way to go. You obviously do. And, I'm sure if we have an opportunity to speak to our listeners and hear from them, they probably agree to it too. And thick armor to crack? Oh my goodness. I mean, what are you talking about? You immediately start talking about the leadership of our provinces butting heads with the federal government about transfer payments. That's the first thing that's going to come up, okay, in terms of healthcare across the country and how that's going to be managed. The finances are going to be managed. Second, I'm telling you, level, Gary, it's damn darned egos. Some of these constituents are begging you to do. And I don't think there is anybody in any province that's going to say, hey, we got a fantastic healthcare system here. I'm getting what I need. My family's getting what their needs. To say, hey, provincial government, you're doing a fantastic job. I think we'd be hard pressed to find a health ministry that's going to get those types of accolades from their citizen constituents. Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be an epic battle, not just simple trying to break the armor. It's breaking the armor and getting somebody else to fit that new armor. I think the ego is just too big. I mean, I think at some point, Gary, you were mentioning to me in the great province of New Brunswick, you've actually got two health divisions, one for the Anglophone side and one for the Francophone side, which makes absolutely zero difference for a province for less than 1 million people. Waste of resources, waste of money, and a waste of effort and efficiency. That's the most inefficient way to actually run a healthcare system, by having two. And I know there's been some discussion in Quebec about having an oversight committee watching another oversight committee to make sure that we're actually moving forward in terms of the health reforms in the province. So um, I would 100% agree with you, Gary. The way to go is to have federal government oversight, complete and absolute, in terms of the healthcare right across the board. Follow a model that works. Don't reinvent the wheel. The systems and what's being provided, as you mentioned, in the military here in Canada, the model seems to work. In the United States, in terms of the overall military healthcare administration, it's standard, it's efficient, it gets the job done. Well, why not look to other countries or other administrations in terms of what they're doing to successfully deploy healthcare across a wide population and a huge territory? And military is a perfect example. And I'm sorry, the military works for the Canadian government. I'm sure they would be very happy to lend a helping hand in trying to restructure all of this. I think that's the easy part: getting a plan, getting a solution in place, getting timelines in place, and getting people across the table. I think that's just 20% of the battle. Okay, the other 80% is going to be the hardheads that are sitting in the provincial capitals, and getting them to accept and adopt this. And who's going to be the first one? Because once you get one or two on board, maybe the rest are going to follow suit. Who's going to be the first? I think that's going to be a very hard pressed issue where, you and I both know 20% planning will ensure 80% execution. Unfortunately, in politics, it doesn't work that way. So I don't know, man.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating, and look, I'm 60 years of age, and I'm going to start needing some better care at some point. I'm falling apart too in some places, but you're not being able to gain access to my family doctor. I think it's going to be a little. I'm going to be a little worried about that. Not having, I think it's called Click Sante, the portal that we're supposed to be using to book our appointments. Gary, the thing's not working half the time. I can't reach anybody on that thing. So what ends up happening? I have to place a phone call. And then I got to wait 2 days for somebody to call me back. And then it's already too late because, oh, my doctor has already been booked for the month. Please call the first week of next month to book your appointment. I managed to finally get one recently, but I got to wait until the end of November because I didn't make the first of the month. So it really, like you said in the onset of our show here, the government does not make it easy to access our doctors in terms of whatever resources are available out there. How do we as citizens gain access to those professionals and individuals? It's crazy, and I'm sure Quebec is not the only province with those kinds of problems either.
Oh no, just look across the country, watch some of the regional newscasts, the three provincial election campaigns that are underway right now. Healthcare is one of the top issues, at the doors
Yes.
as the candidates are going around. And it's not going to go away. We just can't. As I said earlier, thinking outside the box is great, but we have to look at how do we get it right to the front line and how do we do it in an efficient manner. And swapping things around like this, to me, is not an efficient manner for doing it. And I don't know if you caught the comment a moment ago, but could this be a trial balloon? Well, we all know politicians are really very good at flying trial balloons. Let's leak this out or throw something out there and see what kind of reaction we get, and then go from there as to how
Right.
to handle it. And it could very well be that
Well,
that's the case.
well, you know what? I really hope that this is an honest effort to try to do something. Okay. What I would not like to hear between now and the next Quebec election, that this was all a political move by the present government to try to win over some brownie points from a huge constituency. What you're saying is about 1.5 million people that actually need to see a professional. That this is just not a political move to gain some brownie points in terms of popularity, because as we know, Mr. Legault is like bottom, last place or second from the bottom in terms of in terms of popularity for provincial premiers. I really hope this is just not a ploy to gain some brownie points, because that would be extremely sad. Which, as a matter of fact, would go back to what you're saying. The toughest things to crack are the provincial governments, their leaders, and their ministers. If this is the attitude that Quebec is taking toward this, and it's another opportunity for Quebec to show from time to time that it can be a leader in the Federation of Canada, be a leader for a change, and try to do something. So I really hope this is just not all talk, that they're really going to try to do something. Is it fluff, Gary? I think the next 6 to 8 months will tell. I mean, we're looking at him. I think is what, 2 years into his term.
Mm-hmm.
So the campaigning is going to start in about a year and a half. It's throwing out some brownie points right now. I think you and I will find out how much meat there is to this particular drive that the CAC government is trying to move forward with our medical system.
Okay. Well, I think we've rolled around that issue quite a bit. So let's move on to what's been a bombshell week on the spy versus spy front here in Canada. It began on the Thanksgiving weekend with the RCMP announcing stunning allegations accusing agents of the Indian government of playing a role in widespread violence in Canada, including murders, and it warned it poses a serious threat to our public safety. 6 Indian diplomats were expelled earlier this week, and India did the same with Canadian diplomats. This follows Prime Minister Trudeau announcing last year Canada had evidence linking Indian agents to the killing of Canadian Sikh separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar in BC, something India has denied. So there was shock and a firm reaction from the other side, and of course denials. And an interesting take from one Indian pundit who said basically that he thinks part of this was Trudeau trying to detract from his problems here at home politically and the breakup of the NDP Liberal Alliance, and the fact that he is at the bottom of the polls and facing revolt from within his party. So the thing of it is, we're finally, I think, beginning to take security, national security, and national public safety in this country with a little more seriously than what we have in the past. And I think one of the tipping points, Eddie, was back last week when we had the terrorist-sponsored rally out in British Columbia and the burning of the Canadian flag.
Whatnot, yeah.
Yeah. Your thoughts?
You know what, Gary? I think after we did the episode last week, the show last week, and we spent quite a bit of time, and I was getting pretty emotional about what I saw the protesters do, and basically, forfeiting their freedom in terms of these violent acts that were perpetuating on Canadian soil, and what they were promoting, the violence they were promoting, stepping on the Canadian flag, and all that goes with that. And you and I had we had a little bit of a conversation after that in terms of how I felt about that. I mean, I was really getting emotional about it. And the biggest thing that was bothering both you and I is, why hasn't anything been done with some of what our intelligence agencies and our national police forces have been sort of dictating that there are issues here in terms of our national security. We have identified certain groups that might be a danger to Canada's national security, and we were really wondering and scratching our heads, why hasn't our government done anything about it? Okay, so your comment about, is this a political move by Mr. Trudeau to bolster his popularity, as Premier Legault is trying to do things in Quebec? We don't know. We'll never find out. But you know what? When it comes to national security, starting, even we'll go even before the Palestinian protest in Vancouver and the flag burning. We can go even before this whole expulsion of our diplomats from Canadian soil, and India retaliating by sending our people home. We can go back to this whole investigation about China on Canadian soil, opening up offices here under certain umbrellas and trying to influence everything from elections to local policy to how Chinese citizens act within Canada, and they're protected by Canadian law. And nobody's done anything about it. So, here we have two specific incidents that we can put our fingers directly on. This issue in Vancouver last week. We can even go a step before that. All these protests in university campuses, where you had these protests for Palestine, what's going on and whatnot in Israel, in the occupied territories. There was already proof that a lot of the tents that were being put up in these encampments on university campuses were actually perpetuated by members of the Samidun organization. So they were, doing their recruiting, they were, influencing, they were radicalizing students, and all of these shops were set up in all universities across the country, and we did nothing about it. at that time or even before that to prevent it. And now we have everything coming to fruition where Canada finally declared Sami Dun a terrorist organization. About time. Maybe some of this wouldn't have happened in Vancouver. Maybe some of this wouldn't have happened in the Canadian universities. And now we have the entire Indian issue, which has been something that's been talked about since that assassination out in British Columbia. Yet at that time, nothing was really done. And are we actually doing enough with with those two particular conflicts of interest, both in the Middle East and over in India? Are we doing enough to protect Canadian citizens? It doesn't matter from what ethnic origin, whether they're from India, whether they're from Pakistan, honest Canadian, hardworking people. Are we doing enough to protect them? Are we protecting ourselves in terms of our governments being manipulated from an election perspective? All these foreign interests trying to influence our election here in Canada. Um, I don't think we're doing enough. And how many more issues are there today that both the RCMP and CSIS have actually tabled? Either we know about publicly or what's been tabled behind closed doors because a lot of this stuff is confidential. How much is Mr. Trudeau not doing? Is he doing enough or is he not doing enough because he doesn't want to upset potential jurisdictions in terms of his reelection bid, right?
There's a lot to be said for that. I did manage to catch a few minutes of Trudeau's testifying before the federal agency today regarding our national security. And after the two Michaels being taken by China a couple of years ago, uh,
Yeah.
he was saying that they worked through a revision on the way he was presented material and what really got to his desk for action and what was left with his national security advisor. Um, and that's probably a review that should happen every year at the beginning of the year because the the security scene, intelligence scene, spy versus spy scene, whatever you want to call it, is fluid and it's changing, on a daily basis overall. But we do know, I mean, there are some key factors here, and we do know that we have um, terrorists or terrorist supporters in this country now, as we are speaking. We do know that there are groups, and we might, the Russians and the Chinese in particular, who seem to take great delight in getting on social media platforms in this country and spreading misinformation and trying to really stir up the general populace. So we know all of that. And we know that there have been issues, with the so-called Chinese secret police stations in Canada and other things like that. And of course, the whole thing around Najar's assassination in British Columbia last year. Now, I saw something from India earlier today where they were saying that he was considered a terrorist and basically wanted dead or alive. And he was considered a terrorist in India. So we have those factions that are, bubbling over in our country as well. And I don't know, do we need to do tighter screening of people coming into
Yeah.
the country? Do we really need to tighten up our borders? Maybe we do. Maybe there are a number of areas where this sort of thing can be improved. But man, oh man, it just seems like as a country, when it comes to this, over the last number of years, we seem to be a really easy, soft target.
I was just going to interrupt you. I was going to ask you a question, Gary. Has Canada become an easy target for some of these countries that want to influence other governments, dictatorships and whatnot, and B, have we become an easy target because internationally we're seen um, as a softer country. And when I'm saying softer, we talked about it last week in episode 4, where we were speaking about, does the rest of the world respect Canada today like it used to? I mean, I think one example we used was the United Nations. When there was a heavy conflict somewhere in the world, Canada was there trying to promote peace and would contribute to trying to deliver that peaceful resolution. Um, is Canada today being taken advantage of because there is a higher level of disrespect for Canada's authority in the world and for Canada's leadership in the world, that they're not something to be reckoned with anymore? Maybe there's a certain ounce of truth to that, Gary. Maybe we just look like easy targets nowadays because it's Canada. There's those happy people in the northern country in North America, and we don't see very much from them anymore. And oh, you know what? We try this, and we get a slap on our wrist. So let's go a little further with it. I don't know. Is it that simple that we're just that? Or you know what? Are Is our government just naive that these countries are not trying to influence policy here in this country of ours? It could be as simple as that. We're just being too naive about it, or our governments are being too naive,
I think we're being
or
seen
do they
as,
not have the resources to do anything about it?
I think, Eddie, we are being seen um, as a very open country, very welcoming country, very tolerant country in a lot of ways. And a lot of that equates to being very easy. And then easy, can be, okay, yeah, a very laid back lifestyle or whatever. But easy can also be very easy to kind of come in, and we can go in through the front door. We don't have to sneak in through the back door, and just kind of set up, get established, and blend in with society, and we can go about our business and do whatever it is that we're here to do. I I
Right.
I think that part of it being so welcoming has made us appear to be, and really, an easy mark in that respect. And I think that at the political level, a lot of the politics now seems to be focused more on the next election and what's it going to take, A, to build up the party coffers, and B, what do we need to come up with as far as some promises to make sure that we get a solid majority. I sense, and I could be totally wrong on this, but I just sense, especially over the last 5 to 10 years, that the focus of all of, the three mainline parties at the federal level and the two older mainline parties, mainly at the provincial level, is not so much on really the people as it is on the parties. And
Mm-hmm.
how do we make it better for the parties? And I'm really becoming quite concerned about this, and very disturbed about it. If you had asked me 10 years ago, I'd say, well, there is some politicking going on in that, but there are programs moving forward. Well, nothing moves really forward now unless there's an end that is beneficial to the party in power at the time. And so the focus, the minute that happens, to me anyway, the focus comes off the people that you're elected to serve and help, and goes strictly to the party and the party coffers and the leader. That's how I'm feeling about it, and I could be all wet, but I don't know. I don't know. It's not a pretty feeling to have at all.
Right, and like you mentioned about Canadians being welcoming, come to our country, you can make a great life here and whatnot. You know what? That's the case today in most circumstances. Welcome to our country. You have a great place to live here, raise a family, build a career, build a life. Very welcoming. Okay, that's the case today. You know what, Gary? We were like that 10 years ago. We were like that 15 years ago. We were like that 20 years ago. Okay. So, from that sense, Canadians have always been, or the country of Canada has always been welcoming to those that wanted to come here and those that needed help from the refugee status. Okay. We were always there. So, in the last 20 years, it's always been there. So, I don't think anything has changed there. Um, so the question is, what has changed in terms of how some of these countries that promote terrorism and violence perhaps didn't infiltrate us back then at the rate of infiltration today? How do they get more gutsy today? I don't think it has anything to do with how welcoming we are. Something has changed where they're no longer afraid of consequences. They're no longer afraid of the walls that may have been present 20 years ago to prevent these organizations from operating in our country. Those walls don't seem to be there anymore. And those walls are managed and controlled, I'm sorry, by the federal government and its security arms, whether it's the armed forces, whether it's the RCMP nationally, or whether it's CSIS. I don't know if their hands are tied, not enough resources available to contend with the amount of intrusions, if you want to call it. Maybe there's just too many intrusions out there for them to deal with at the same time. But
Well,
the
the
unfortunate part is, Gary, intrusion that you and I see every time we seem to feel that you didn't react to this properly. A lot of people knew about it, but why didn't you do anything about it? And lately, there seems to be more of, yeah, I'm going to do something about it now, but it's already kind of late, right?
and the other side of it is um, we have not been funding our security agencies and our armed forces to the level that we need to be funding them, especially now in the world in which we live, which has changed significantly since 9/11. And the other
Yes.
side of it is, you know, as far as the terrorist groups are concerned and how they're getting so bold now, too, is they have this weapon that they didn't have 15 years ago, and that's called the internet. They have direct access now to millions of people almost instantaneously. And they have the pipeline to people who may be very easily swayed and indoctrinated. And that's happening around the
Yeah.
world today. And it's happening to some people here in Canada as well. They all of a sudden they're on the internet and they start going down the rabbit hole and they pick the wrong rabbit hole and they're hooked up with somebody who is working on behalf of Hamas or Hezbollah, and the indoctrination begins.
Yeah,
And
no, sorry, Gary.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, you're absolutely right. The technologies they have enabled a lot of the more rebellious forces in the world and the more extreme forces in the world to gain access to the individual citizen, right? And you can have debates about this for years and years and years, not have a solution to it. But as long as that medium is available to anybody who has access to the internet, and this type of this type of information is not screened from the general public, you're never going to be able to resolve this. Now that opens a whole other can of worms in terms of discussion and freedom of access of information and freedom of rights in terms of screening all of this information or misinformation that's coming into the country, whether it's Canada, United States, I don't care, France, England. They're experiencing the same intrusions across the internet where they're young, there are people, and a lot of younger people are being influenced by these extremist organizations and views. Um, what's the solution? In the good old days, you just put up a wall and okay, you can't climb over this wall anymore. Technology wise, there are all kinds of potential solutions. I think. I mean, listen, Gary, you and I on the internet, there's a thousands of algorithms monitoring our every keystroke. It doesn't matter what social platform you're on, to be able to geolocate you, target your age, and then present the information that potentially they think you might want to see, or might want to buy, advertising and that kind of lovely stuff, right? So there's all kinds of algorithms that can be built. Now you're looking at artificial intelligence that's really picking up in many domains across the world. Um, so what do we need to do to build up our walls? We have to fight technology with technology. Okay, um, build algorithms that'll weed out this type of extreme information that would be harmful to our country. And like again, you're going to be getting into freedom of access to information and freedom of rights. Well, you know what? At some particular point in time, there's got to be freedom of defending the citizens of our country. It's not saying, "Oh, mommy knows what little Sonny Boy can or cannot see." This is basically protecting Sonny Boy from horrible things happening to them. And you know what? They're going to find these solutions when something terrible has already happened to our country. Oh, you know what? We're going to have to prevent this happening the next time. Well, you know what? The next time might be way too late. We may not be speaking about the outcome of an election. We may not be speaking about individuals putting up tents in McGill University for 2 months and having a free for all on property. We're talking about maybe dozens or hundreds of people dying because that we did not do anything about preventing extremist views being presented to minds that absorb it very freely. So, I'm for information being blocked out that would be detrimental to Canada. That's just my view. Okay, fine. I didn't see anything come over from the Middle East that where somebody went out and criticized the way we treat a particular ethnic group here in Canada, and we don't treat ethnic groups any differently one way or the other. Um, uh, I'm all in favor of having our government, on behalf of myself as a citizen in Canada, eliminate or limit what's coming in from overseas, which is not good for Canada or our citizens, especially when it speaks to the security of the country. Right?
And with that, I think we'll move along because that's an issue that we'll be probably talking about over the next couple of months, I'm sure. Eddie, less than a week after the $7 million taxpayer funded NHL exhibition games in Quebec City, Premier Francois Legault has thrown more salt on the wound. Apparently, at some point, he used a government credit card to purchase a Montreal Canadiens hockey jersey signed by the late Guy Lafleur. And it had it framed to hang in his office. Now, are you ready for this? The total? Well, the jersey was just under $1,300 and add another $900 to have it framed to hang in his office. But that's not all. Le Journal de Montreal also reports the Premier's office bought 14 Guy Lafleur jerseys, all autographed, as gifts for premiers of other provinces and territories as part of a virtual meeting of the Council of Federation 3 years ago. What was he thinking?
Yeah. Yeah. No. You know what? I mean, when I heard, I mean, I was away when I heard about it, but at first glance, it's like exactly your reaction. What are you doing? I mean, first of all, aside from using public funds to do this, okay, he knows he's down at the bottom of the pickle barrel when it comes to popularity as a premier, and CAC is trailing, I think, by 20 percentage points the Parti Québécois in terms of the next if the election was held today, right? So how much more controversy do you want to? Are you willing to absorb on top of all the other controversies you continue to create? So, it, if I was a movie star and I hire a public relations organization to manage my affairs on this, I would expect my public relations manager to say, Eddie, not a good move. It's not going to be very popular with your fans. Where were his people in terms of directing him on what he should be doing and what he shouldn't be doing? So that's just completely on the outside and using public funding to buy the jerseys in the first place and mount himself in his office. Okay, so that's on the outside. So I read the article in the Montreal Gazette about this, and I read the entire article in the Journal de Montréal about this, and it was good to see the Montreal Gazette basically not take credit for it and basically say this came from the Journal de Montréal, and they basically paraphrased some of the comments in the Journal de Montreal, and they basically presented what they're saying. Okay, now if you look at this as a corporate event, okay, a company with senior managers around the country, bring them around the table, and you each give them a gift. You know what? I think this happens on a regular basis where the federal government might invite the premiers of the provinces. They might take them out to a dinner or present them with an Inuit gift for representing the country, and thank you very much for being the premier, and so on and so forth, and gift. So let's just give Mr. Legault the credit for that. That he's based. I think he was head of some sort of a committee that was overseeing the rest of the premiers in terms of activity of a particular project of sorts. So you know what? I'll give him that. I bought gifts for everyone right across the country. Thank you very much for your contributions over the last 2 years for this particular mandate. Okay, so you know what? Let's call that a business gift. Let's call that a gift from the Premier of Quebec to the rest of the premiers of the rest of the provinces. Just like if everybody went to Alberta for an energy conference, I'm sure they buy gifts and give them to everybody. I think the mistake that Mr. Legault, and by the way, the Journal de Montréal was extremely, extremely critical of what Mr. Legault did. They did give him the benefit of the doubt of executing a business transaction here as gifts. I mean, they lambasted him from beginning to end. Okay. The second piece that both the Montreal Gazette and the Journal de Montréal criticized him about is his particular gift, the one that he has for himself, which is the same one as the other premiers have. And that his staff went out and took this Guy Lafleur shirt, which I think, okay, great. And they had it framed, or he had it framed, which cost about $1,200 out in Laval, so he can hang it in his office. Okay? Now, here's the argument. If this piece of property remains in the Premier of Quebec's office after Mr. Legault leaves, you know what? It's still the property of the government of Quebec.
Right.
However, Mr. Legault is one hell of a hockey fan, very knowledgeable about hockey, very passionate Montreal Canadiens fan, especially when Le Démon Blonde, the Blonde Demon, signed it to Francois from Guy Lafleur. Thank you very much. I highly doubt that somebody who has his name on a hockey shirt is going to keep it in the office for the next Premier of Quebec to basically look at it and enjoy. So I think that's where I think he faltered, is the fact that the public funding was used for a gift that was specifically written to him and his name. I think that's where the brouhaha is, justifiably, by every citizen in Quebec and quite frankly every citizen in Canada, because they should question what our premier is doing in terms of spending public funding for gifts across the country, and how many times are they keeping 1/14 of the gift load in their own pockets. So you know what, in my opinion, Gary, he shouldn't have done any of it. The fact that he executed a business transaction for gifts for the other premiers, I'm kind of on a seesaw about that. You know what? Did he do it for those reasons? Did he not do it for those reasons? I don't know. But unfortunately, public funding was used. But the personal one in his office, that one there, I think he made a big mistake, or his staff made a big mistake doing this in terms of getting it completely framed in a really nice package for him. And I know he's going to take this gift with him. So yeah, he didn't. I agree with you 100%, Gary. He really blew this one. No
Well,
question.
and it could have been caught right away in the fact that, okay, the story broke. Where were the comms people? Get out in front and say, and with the receipt to say that, or cancel check, whatever, to say that Legault had reimbursed the province for the money because it is,
Mm-hmm.
a sweater and it was signed to him. He has reimbursed the province for the money, and at the time it was, the government credit card was used because we were in the process of buying these other gifts as well, sort of thing. But the premier has reimbursed, and once that had been put out, then it's game over, story done.
Yeah.
No legs
But
on
did he
that story.
reimburse after? Here's a question though for you. I don't know what the case is, Gary. What did the premier reimburse the province before the story broke or after the story broke?
I don't know if he has. That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
He
I see.
should have. Somebody should have gotten to him and just said, look, either he did and you just release that and the story has no legs, or he didn't, and at least get to him and say, pay for it and we'll just put it out, that you paid for it. You've been meaning to do it, but you've
Right.
been busy, sort of thing, right?
Well, and the
And
other thing is,
yeah,
and the other thing too is, Gary, he's a multimillionaire. Okay. Um, there's nothing that would have prevented him from spending the $4,000, which I think is what it costs for the 14-year lease. How much would he not have for dessert if he actually spent the $4,000 for his buddies that are running the other jurisdictions across the country and say, hey, here's a gift from me. You know what? That would have been probably a better move by him in terms of his constituents in the province of Quebec respecting that.
yep, and probably
But
would have
man,
been a
just
tax write-off
blew
for
the
him too.
opportunity in the wrong way.
So
Yeah,
anyway, it's just
exactly. I don't
just
know. He
just
just
yeah,
continuously digs a grave for himself deeper and deeper.
that he does. And speaking of digging graves deeper and deeper with voters in Saskatchewan are going to the polls on the 28th, with incumbent Scott Moe trying to lead his Saskatchewan party back to power. He's being challenged by New Democrat leader Carla Beck, and both parties are running full slates of 61 candidates. The Green Party is running 58 candidates. The Saskatchewan United Party has 31 candidates, while all the others are running less than 20 candidates. Now, the carbon tax, health care, and housing are key elements in the campaign, with both parties promising tax cuts and more funding for health care. By the way, the two leaders are squaring off in a debate tonight out in Saskatchewan. In BC, advanced voting is underway for that provincial election, and turnout is reported to be really heavy today. Actual voting day is Saturday. And in New Brunswick, voters go to the polls on Monday. Incumbent Conservative Blaine Higgs being challenged by Liberal Susan Holt. The Green Party, led by David Coon, is preparing to make a power play in the event the Conservatives or the Liberals find themselves in minority territory. Advanced polling was this past Saturday and Monday, and again, a heavy turnout was reported. Now, normally, the old school used to be that if you had a heavy turnout at the advanced polls, that meant that it was going against the government of the day, kind of thing. I can tell you that in New Brunswick, the polling is really pretty tight. At one point, the Liberals had managed to poll ahead a 5% lead, but that was well within the margin of error on the poll, so essentially a dead heat. And it seems that one of the last polls that I saw just over the weekend or just before the weekend was that it looked like the Conservatives and Higgs were starting to claw back a bit, and really, they're neck and neck as far as the polling is concerned. So that's going to be a really interesting one. Susan Holt, the Liberal leader, is new at the helm. She's been there about a year, a little over a year now, and of course, Blaine Higgs is seeking his second majority mandate. He was the first one during the pandemic to go with a provincial election, and after that, we had a few other provincial elections. So, his popularity. Speaking of Premier Legault's popularity, the two of them have been trading places for the bottom two spots in popularity across the country. Yeah, so it's Higgs has an uphill battle, but you know what? They could end up with a minority government, and the Greens could factor right into the middle. Although the Green Party leader has said he has no thoughts whatsoever of forming an alliance with the Conservatives if they are in the minority. So it looks like if the Conservatives are in the minority, he's going to pull his votes over to his party over to the Liberals. But then the Greens only had 3 members in the legislature this trip around. I'm not sure how they're going to do. I think those 3 seats may be pretty secure, but it depends on how the numbers all come out. So that'll be an interesting one to watch as well. And also, the Premier Higgs is promising a 2% cut in the HST in the province if re-elected.
When are they going to the polls in New Brunswick again, Gary?
Monday.
On Monday, okay.
Yeah, so we have BC voting on Saturday, New Brunswick voting on Monday, and Saskatchewan on the 28th.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess that's going to be a wrap for tonight, Eddie. We kind of went a little bit over time, but we had a lot of stuff to get through, and once again, a couple of little glitches along the way, but not as bad as what we've encountered. So either I'm getting better at operating, or things are really just starting to settle down, and muscle memory and everything else is kicking in. So anyway, remember to subscribe.
Gary, once again, thank you for setting all this up.
Well, hey, it's a lot of fun to do it. So, and to be able to get on and do this and offer people the opportunity to listen to views of just a couple of people sitting around, just ordinary Canadians, as we say. And we also want to encourage anyone watching, whether you're watching live or if you're watching after the fact, to remember to either leave a comment if you're watching one of the recorded versions, leave a comment. And if you're watching live, log into the chat channel on YouTube. You just need your Gmail account. You just log in with that, and you're in, and you can take part in the live chat. And we'd love to have more of your thoughts and comments coming in live to challenge us, to question us, and to put your ideas out there in front of everyone as well. So remember to subscribe, click on like and share to help the channel grow. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch and or comment tonight. Night Talk returns in 7 days. Good night.
Good night.